The wind across Raxus, 9 carried the taste of iron and smoke. What used to be a mining colony now lay buried under layers of ash. The sun, if you could call that dim ember a sun, hung behind a haze of dust, throwing long shadows over the remains of once tall towers. The air shimmered faintly, alive with static from the orbital wreckage falling through the atmosphere like burning rain. Sergeant Jack Harlan stood at the edge of the shattered command outpost, helmet off, cigarette pressed between his lips. The smoke curled upward, lost in the gray wind. His armor was dented, paint chipped, edges scarred. The kind of wear that told a story long before he ever opened his mouth. Behind him, a group of alien recruits stood in an awkward half-circle. Their armor gleamed, too clean, too new. The recruits were soldiers of the Galactic Peace Force, and though they had been trained for battle, none had actually seen one. Their insectoid limbs trembled slightly as they watched the horizon pulse with distant explosions. One of them, a young Zevran named Threk, stepped forward. His voice was a mechanical rasp filtered through a translator chip. Sergeant Harlan, command says the evacuation shuttles are preparing for launch. They request your unit's immediate withdrawal. Harlan flicked the ash off his cigarette. Command can request all they want. They'll get it when I'm done. Threk's mandibles clicked in confusion. But the Dominion fleet, there are hundreds of them. They will overrun this sector in hours. Then we'll make those hours count, Harlan said, finally turned to face them. His eyes, a deep gray, seemed older than the war itself. You think this rock's worthless? Maybe to the brass. But every minute we hold buys time for someone else to get clear. You can't measure that with logic. The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. Logic was all they knew. Harlan sighed, lowering his voice. You kids were trained by machines. Simulations. Perfect tactics. Perfect responses. But war isn't perfect. It's mud and fire and fear. You don't win because you calculate better. You win because you refuse to lose. A silence fell. The distant thunder of plasma bombardment rolled through the ground, shaking the metal beneath their boots. Harlan took another drag, then crushed a cigarette under his heel. All right, listen up. The Dominion's advancing through the western ridge. Their first wave will hit the perimeter in 30 minutes. We've got drones, gun emplacements, and whatever courage you can scrape together. You hold until I say otherwise. Anyone panics. Remember, panic kills faster than bullets. The soldier straightened, trying to imitate his calm. Threk hesitated before asking, Sergeant, do humans always face impossible odds as casually? Harlan smirked. We don't face them casually. We face them because nobody else will. He turned away, walking toward the command console. The holographic map flickered, a mess of static and red blips closing in. The Dominion signal jammed communications, isolating them completely. Above, the sky glowed faintly red. Orbital defense satellites were dying one by one. Harlan muttered, mostly to himself, hell of a first day on the job. A voice crackled through the damaged comms unit. Colonel Anders, somewhere in orbit. Harlan, we're losing ships faster than we can count. Coalition's pulling back. Orders are fall in and regroup. Harlan didn't answer right away. He looked out across the ruined horizon, then said flatly, Negative, sir. We hold Raxus, 9 until the last civilian transport clears atmosphere. There was a pause. That's a suicide mission. Most of mine are, Harlan said. Then cut the line. He walked back toward the troops. Prep all defenses. Deploy drones along the ridge and reroute power to the eastern turrets. I want overlapping fields of fire. The soldiers moved mechanical and precise, though their movements carried the weight of uncertainty. As they worked, Harlan moved among them, checking connections, reinforcing positions, muttering small corrections. Every motion was deliberate, no wasted effort. Sergeant, one of the recruits said quietly, why risk your life for a planet that isn't even human? Harlan looked at him. Because someone has to show the galaxy what it means to stand your ground. Doesn't matter what dirt we're standing on. He didn't say it, but in his mind he saw faces, men and women long gone. The Marines who'd fought beside him on Mars, on Europa, in the ruins of Titan Station. Ghosts who'd laughed in the face of death and kept fighting anyway. The rumble in the distance grew louder. The first wave was coming. The horizon shimmered with the faint outlines of Regolian dropships descending like steel vultures. Threk's voice shook. "They're here." Harlan picked up his rifle, the matte black surface worn smooth from years of use. He loaded a fresh magazine, the click echoing like a heartbeat. "Good. Let's give them a welcome party." He climbed the sandbag wall and crouched behind a mounted plasma cannon. "Remember your training. Stick to cover. Trust your fire teams. You don't break formation unless I say so." The alien recruits tensed, their weapons humming to life. The air filled with a faint whine of charging capacitors. The first Regolian soldiers hit the ridge, a wave of metallic beasts half machine, half organic, their armor glinting in the red light. They moved like predators, precise and silent. Harlan squinted, finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Wait for it. Hold. A plasma bolt slammed into the dirt near his feet, showering him with dust. He didn't flinch. "Now!" The ridge erupted in fire. Plasma cannons roared. Drones screamed overhead. The ground lit up with blue energy arcs. Regolian troops fell, torn apart by the barrage, but more kept coming. Endless ranks of chrome and fury. Harlan fired short, controlled bursts, cutting down targets with the precision of experience. Every shot meant something. Every movement was exact. "Keep firing!" he shouted over the noise. "Don't let them regroup." The recruits fought hard. Fear burned away under the rhythm of combat. For the first time, they understood what it meant to fight for something. Not for orders, not for data, but for each other. A Regolian drone broke through the perimeter, charging straight toward the command post. Harlan dropped his rifle, grabbed a plasma grenade, and hurled it. The explosion lit the field, throwing the drone back in a burst of molten light. "Nice try," he muttered. Then the comms unit buzzed again, faint but clear. "Sergeant Harlan, evacuation is 90% complete. We need 5 more minutes." He exhaled slowly, reloading. "You've got 5. After that, the fireworks start." As the next wave advanced, the sky itself seemed to catch fire. A Dominion cruiser broke through the clouds, its cannons illuminating the battlefield. The alien troops faltered, some whispering prayers in their native tongues. Harlan looked up, face illuminated by the crimson glow. "Big one, huh?" He cracked a half-smile. "Guess they really don't like Marines." He reached into his pocket, pulled out another cigarette, and lit it on the barrel of his rifle, still hot from combat. The flame reflected in his eyes, steady and unafraid. "Let them come," he said quietly, smoke curling through his words. "We'll teach them what humans do when the universe says impossible." The wind carried his voice over the burning ridge. And as the Dominion army advanced, Sergeant Jack Harlan stood his ground. Calm, resolute, unyielding. The night on Raxus, 9 burned instead of darkened. The sky was a furnace of streaking plasma, fire, debris, and thunder that never stopped. Every explosion lit the ground in flashes of white and red, painting the battlefield like a heartbeat. Sergeant Jack Harlan crouched behind a collapsed barricade, rifle steady on his knee. His visor displayed heat signatures moving across the ridge, too many to count. The Dominion wasn't attacking like soldiers anymore. They were flooding the field like a machine tide. He keyed his comms. "Squad 2, hold your flank. Don't let them circle behind us." A static cracked reply came through. "Flanks holding, Sergeant, but we're running dry on plasma cells." "Then make every shot count," he said. "You'll be surprised how long a fight lasts when you stop wasting ammo." Threk slid into cover beside him, panting through his respirator. The Zevran's armor was scorched, and his translator glitched between words. "We cannot keep this pace. The enemy does not fatigue. We will—" "Yeah, they don't tire," Harlan interrupted, eyes locked on his scope. "But they don't think either. That's why they lose." He fired 3 times, each round slamming into the chest of a Regolian trooper. The last one collapsed in a heap of molten metal. "See that? Thinking beats programming." Threk watched him reload with a kind of reverent disbelief. Human persistence defies logic. Harlan smirked. That's the idea. Another explosion tore through the trench, showering them in dirt and shrapnel. Alarms blared. One of the outer turrets went silent. Harlan grabbed the comm. Turret 3's down. Someone get it back online before they breach the ridge. A voice responded through the static, strained and shaking. We're on it, Sergeant. Power couplings fried. Rerouting to the secondary line. Do it fast, Harlan said. We lose that turret, they pour right through. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the smoke, heavy metallic. A Regolian juggernaut stepped into view, twice Harlan's height, its armor glowing faintly blue with energy shields. Harlan muttered, Well, that's new. Threk aimed his plasma rifle. Our weapons cannot penetrate its barrier. Harlan rose slightly, squinting through the haze. Then we improvise. He scanned the battlefield and spotted a damaged crawler vehicle overturned nearby, its fuel cells exposed. Cover me, he said. Before Threk could protest, Harlan sprinted through the wreckage, plasma bolts snapping past him. He slid behind the crawler, pulled a frag charge from his belt, and set it on exposed cells. He primed it, waited for the juggernaut to step closer, and shouted, Hey, chrome for brains! The machine turned its head just in time to see Harlan dive for cover. The explosion tore through the ridge, a rolling wave of flame that turned the air to liquid heat. The juggernaut toppled backward, armor melting into slag. Threk stared, wide-eyed. You are insane. Harlan brushed soot off his armor. Probably, but it worked. For a few moments, there was silence, just a low hum of cooling metal and the distant crackle of fires. Then the comm buzzed again. Sergeant Harlan, this is command. Dominion reinforcements inbound from orbit, massive signatures. You have 15 minutes before they hit your position. Copy that. Harlan said, voice comm. Evacuation status? 98% complete. Last transport leaves in 10. Then we hold for 15, Harlan said, and cut the line. He turned to the squad. We're buying them 5 more minutes, people. Make them count. The aliens nodded, their earlier fear replaced by grim determination. Even Threk's voice held a spark of something new, resolve. Sergeant, Threk said quietly, when this is over, will anyone remember us? Harlan checked his rifle. They'll remember the ones who didn't run. The Dominion's next assault began like a storm breaking. Artillery screamed from the hills, plasma bombs pounding their defenses. The ground shook violently. Several recruits were thrown off their feet. Harlan grabbed one by the collar, pulled him back into cover. Stay down. You can't fight if you're dead. He peeked over the ridge, Regolian troops advancing in perfect formation, shields interlocked, weapons glowing. He exhaled slowly. All right, time for something stupid. He switched channels. Drones. Prioritize the center line. Focus fire on the biggest target. Make them scatter. The sky lit up as drone clusters descended, raining plasma down on the enemy's front line. The formation broke, chaos spreading through their ranks. Harlan seized a moment. Now, all units, push forward. Keep the pressure up. He vaulted the barricade, leading the charge down the ridge. The aliens followed, shouting in their native tongues, their fear burned away by the momentum of defiance. The two forces collided in a roar of metal and fury. Harlan's rifle barked in controlled bursts, every pull of the trigger deliberate. A Regolian soldier lunged at him with a plasma blade. He sidestepped, grabbed its arm, and drove a combat knife through the creature's neck joint. Sparks flared as the machine collapsed. Threk covered his flank, firing precise bursts. Sergeant, more incoming from the east. Then we pivot east. Harlan barked. Don't let them pin us. They shifted formation, moving like a single organism. The aliens were learning fast. They'd stopped fighting like machines and started fighting like Marines. Minutes felt like hours. The world narrowed to sound and instinct. The hiss of plasma, fire, the crunch of boots on gravel, the dull thud of detonations. Then the comm crackled again. All transports clear. Repeat, all transports clear. You can fall back now. Harlan froze, rifle halfway raised. The message hit harder than any blast. The job was done. He looked around at the exhausted faces of his troops. Threk's armor was cracked. Another recruit bled from a shoulder wound. Yet their eyes burned with pride. Harlan nodded slowly. You heard them. Time to go. But even as he said it, the ground shook violently. A massive shadow fell across the field. Through the smoke, a Regolian command ship descended, engines glowing like suns. Threk whispered, "That is no transport. That is a warship." Harlan's expression hardened. "Then it's here for me." The ship's bay doors opened and a figure emerged, tall, silver-skinned, eyes burning with cold blue light. The Dominion general, Karath himself. Every soldier on the ridge froze. The air felt heavier. Karatha's voice carried over the battlefield, deep and resonant. "Human, you defy inevitability with stubbornness. Surrender now. You have earned a quick death." Harlan stood his ground. He looked up, cigarette between his lips, voice calm. "You talk too much." Karath tilted his head, curious. "You fight, knowing you will die. Why?" "Because someone's got to show you machines what living looks like," Harlan said, lighting his cigarette on a piece of burning debris. The dust settled briefly, a deceptive calm before the storm. The battlefield lay torn and smoldering. Craters where turrets once stood, wreckage scattered like bones. The air reeked of ozone and burning circuitry. Karath, towering and gleaming like a god of war, stepped down from his warship. His armor moved with quiet hum, seamless plates shifting as if alive. Each stride left cracks in the stone beneath him. Sergeant Jack Harlan wiped sweat and soot from his brow, eyes narrowing. His rifle was empty. He dropped the magazine, checked his sidearm. 2 clips left. He holstered it, flexing his gloved hands. "Guess we're doing this the old-fashioned way." The alien soldiers around Karath withdrew, forming a circle. They knew what was coming. This wasn't strategy. It was theater. The Dominion general wanted a show. Karatha's voice resonated through the static-filled air. "You are human. They say your kind survived extinction through violence, that your hearts burn hotter than your sons. Tell me, Marine, do you truly believe defiance can rewrite destiny?" Harlan's tone was dry, steady. "I don't believe in destiny. I believe in not quitting when everything says you should." Karath tilted his head slightly, amused. "Then let this be your lesson in futility." Without warning, the alien lunged. The ground split under the impact of his first strike. Harlan rolled aside, dirt and shrapnel slicing his armor. He came up fast, drew his sidearm, and fired 3 precise shots. The round sparked harmlessly off the general's shields. Karath advanced. Harlan ducked under a swing that would have taken his head off, planted a boot against the general's leg joint, and fired point-blank into a gap between armor plates. The shot scorched the metal but didn't break through. "Interesting," Karath said, his tone almost approving. "Instinctive, efficient, but doomed." Harlan circled him, keeping low, calculating. "You talk like a machine that's never been hit hard enough." Karath charged again, faster this time. Harlan barely dodged, the shock wave throwing him backward. He hit the dirt, breath knocked out of him. The general's blade extended from his forearm, humming with energy. Harlan's HUD flickered. Shields critical, heart rate spiking. He spat blood into the dust and laughed under his breath. "You're strong, I'll give you that. But you're predictable." He triggered a wrist-mounted pulse grenade and rolled. The device detonated in a blinding flash. Karath staggered, shields flickering. Harlan sprinted in, driving his combat knife into the exposed circuitry near the general's ribs. Sparks erupted. Karath roared, the sound shaking the ground. His backhand caught Harlan squarely, sending him flying. The Marine crashed into a pile of wreckage, armor cracking. Pain flared across his ribs. Threk and the others, still holding the outer ridge, saw the impact. "Sergeant," Threk shouted over comms. Harlan coughed, forcing air into his lungs. "Stay where you are, soldier. This one's mine." He pushed himself up, limping slightly, face streaked with grime. Across the clearing, Karath touched his side where the knife still smoked. "You bleed," Harlan said. Guess that makes you mortal after all. Karatha's eyes burned brighter. Mortal? Perhaps, but far superior. Funny, Harlan said, reloading his pistol. I've heard that before, from every fool who thought humanity was easy to kill. They met again in the center of the ruined field. Metal against grit, will against inevitability. Karath swung with mechanical precision. Each blow intended to end it. Harlan blocked with broken steel, ducked under, countered with strikes aimed at joints and cables. He fought dirty, fast, human. The alien's frustration grew. You fight without order. No pattern. No logic. That's the secret, Harlan said through gritted teeth. You can't predict chaos. He dropped low, kicked Karatha's knee sideways, and fired into the same damaged spot. The round tore through the weakened plating. The general staggered, snarling. Harlan pressed the advantage, slamming the butt of his pistol into Karatha's head. You want to know what makes us dangerous, he growled. We don't stop. Karath recovered instantly, grabbing Harlan by the chest plate and hurling him into a wall of stone. The impact cracked his visor. You will, Karath said coldly. Every species breaks eventually. Harlan's voice came through the helmet's crackling speaker, low and firm. Not us. He ripped a broken power combo from the ground, sparks showering his gloves, and drove it into Karatha's armor. Electricity surged through both of them. Harlan screamed as the current tore through his body, but he didn't let go. Karath convulsed, shields collapsing in a burst of light. Harlan fell backward, smoke rising from his armor. The general staggered to one knee, steam hissing from ruptured joints. You're finished, Karath said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Harlan crawled to his feet, trembling but standing tall. You first. He raised his pistol again, but it clicked empty. Both men stared at each other. The soldier with nothing left but grit, the general with all his power stripped down to fury. Karath straightened, drawing his blade again. You fought well, human. Be honored. You will die by a superior hand. Harlan met his gaze. Superior? You still don't get it. He reached down, pulling a final grenade from his belt, the kind forbidden under coalition law, a fusion charge. Its indicator blinked red in the dark. Karath paused. What is that? Harlan's smirk was tired, almost gentle. Insurance. He activated the timer. You wanted to see what makes humans special? It's this. We don't care how bad it gets. We care why we fight. The general lunged, realizing too late. Harlan threw himself forward, tackling him to the ground. The grenade wedged between them, light pulsing faster. Through the roaring noise and pain, Harlan's voice carried, quiet but clear, for the ones who couldn't make it out, for the ones who still believe we can. Karatha's last word was a roar drowned by the explosion. The blast consumed the ridge, a white-hot sun tearing through metal and stone. The shockwave rippled across miles, toppling Dominion troops, shattering the warship's shields. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The Dominion line had broken. Hours later, rescue ships arrived. The sky had cleared slightly, and the fires were dying. Threx stumbled through the ash, searching. Amid the wreckage, he found a cracked Marine helmet, visor shattered but intact enough to bear a name, Harlan J. He knelt, placing a hand over it. He stayed, he whispered. The comm link crackled faintly, broadcast frequencies catching the last echo of Harlan's transmission. Tell them, Earth still fi. The horizon over Mars shimmered in hues of bronze and blood red. Dust storms crawled across the plains like restless ghosts, wrapping the Terran outpost in a whispering shroud. The domes of the base glowed faintly under the artificial light, their metallic surfaces scarred from months of bombardment. Inside, the silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of filtration systems struggling against the choking air outside. Captain Daniel Briggs sat in the dim mess hall, elbows on the steel table, a half-burnt cigarette dangling between his fingers. He hadn't lit it. Just the smell of the tobacco reminded him of Earth, of rain-soaked mornings and laughter in small bars before the war. Now, even memories felt rationed. Sir, Private Lien's voice came from the doorway. She was young, Sharp-eyed, one of the few left who still looked alive in the eyes. Recon drones picked up movement near Sector Theta. It's not ours. Briggs straightened. Alien forces? Unknown, sir. But they're not moving like troops. More like civilians. Briggs rose. The chair screeched against the floor. Civilians. That word had no meaning here. The Galactic Coalition didn't use civilians. They used slaves or soldiers. If someone wasn't fighting, they were dead. Gear up, he said, voice steady. We'll take a look. The Martian night was a storm of amber dust and static. As Briggs led a squad to Broken Ridge towards Sector Theta, the crunch of their boots echoed in the hollow wind. The air filters hissed inside their helmets. Every breath sounded like a reminder of how fragile life was out here. They crested a dune, and there, under the dull light of a twin moon, were figures. Small, thin, moving slowly. Not soldiers. They were alien, yes, pale-skinned, frail-limbed, carrying children wrapped in tattered cloth. Refugees. Jesus, Lien whispered. They're not armed. Briggs raised a hand, signaling silence. He watched through his scope. There were about 24 of them, clustered together like frightened birds. No weapons, no insignia, just hunger and exhaustion. Sir, what do we do? Asked Corporal Reyes, his tone tight. Briggs exhaled. We're Marines, Reyes, not executioners. But Command said... I don't give a damn what Command said. We're bringing them in. Inside the outpost decontamination bay, the aliens trembled as the humans processed them. They spoke in soft, musical tones, a language barely deciphered. One of them, an older woman, met Briggs's gaze. Her eyes, though alien, were filled with something painfully familiar. Fear and pleading. Lien handed Briggs a tablet. Translators picking up fragments. They say their world was destroyed. Not by us. By the Dominion. Briggs frowned. Dominion? Not part of the Coalition. Something worse, apparently. The ones who destroyed their colonies before we even landed here. Briggs looked back at the refugees. The galaxy was supposed to be divided. Humans versus the Coalition. But if there was another player, one that devoured everything in its path, then maybe the real enemy wasn't who they thought. Keep them safe, he said. No one touches them unless I say so. Reyes hesitated. Sir, this could be a trap. Maybe, Briggs said. But sometimes the only way to find truth is to risk stepping into the lie. Hours later, Briggs stood in the command center, watching the data feeds. The Martian storm outside was thickening, visibility dropping fast. On the screens, sensors flickered with interference. The base was cut off from orbit again. No communication with command, no reinforcements. He rubbed his temples. Sleep was a luxury he hadn't had in weeks. His reflection in the glass looked older, harder. The war had taken everything. Time, trust, the simplicity of right and wrong. Now, even his enemy was blurring. Lien entered quietly. They want to speak to you, sir. The elder woman says she knows why the Coalition attacked Earth. That caught his attention. He followed her to the infirmary, where the refugees rested. The elder stood, frail but dignified. The translator hummed beside her as she spoke. We did not want this war, the voice machine translated in a gentle tone. The Coalition feared your kind, not because of your weapons, but because of what you would become. Briggs frowned. Become? We were just defending ourselves. The alien's eyes glowed faintly. You were growing too fast, too fearless. Empires are built on fear. When they saw that you were not afraid, they chose to destroy you before you could stand beside them. Briggs stared at her. So they declared war out of fear? Yes, fear of your resilience. Fear that your kind cannot be broken. For a long moment, Briggs said nothing. Outside, thunder rolled to the Martian sky, the storm pressing against the domes like an ocean. He thought of the soldiers he'd lost, the orders he'd followed, the countless alien bodies left behind in the dust. All of it born from fear. Then they made the wrong call, he muttered. We don't stop when we're afraid. We adapt. The alien nodded slowly. That is why they fear you. Later that night, Briggs sat alone in the observation deck. The glass vibrated faintly from the wind. He lit the cigarette he'd been holding since morning. The smoke curled lazily in the dim air, catching the reflection of the red planet below. He thought of the refugees, of the strange twist of fate that had brought enemies into his care. The line between human and alien was fading. Maybe it had never really been there. Lien's voice came through the comms. "Sir, long-range scans show movement again. East Ridge. Large formation. It's not coalition. Bigger." Briggs flicked Ash into the tray. "How big?" "Big enough that the ground sensors are shaking." He stood. "Wake the squad. And get those refugees underground." "Sir, what are we dealing with?" He looked out at the storm, where flashes of distant light tore through the horizon like the breath of gods. "Something worse than war," he said quietly. "Something that doesn't care who wins." The night sky above Mars tore open with thunder that didn't belong to nature. Brilliant streaks of light cut through the storm, too precise to be lightning, orbital dropships, burning through the atmosphere in tight formation. The ground shook as shock waves rippled to the desert, scattering red dust like blood from an open wound. Captain Daniel Briggs stood on the outer platform of the Terran outpost, his armor coated in Martian grit, visor reflecting the chaos beyond the horizon. The sensors screamed warnings. Lien's voice cut through the comms, sharp and urgent. "Multiple signatures approaching, sir. Not coalition, unknown tech, heavier than anything we've seen." "Then it's them," Briggs muttered. "The Dominion." For weeks, they'd heard rumors. Entire systems vanishing. Signals cut mid-sentence. Planet silenced overnight. Now, the silence had found them. "Seal the gates," he ordered. "Bring all civilians into Sub-A 9. Power up the rail cannons." "Already on it," Lien replied. "But, sir, what if we can't hold?" Briggs stared into the swirling storm. "Then we make them bleed before we fall." Inside the command center, the atmosphere was suffocating. Screens flickered with interference, each one a window into impending destruction. Private Reyes hunched over the tactical display, hands trembling slightly. "They're landing all around us," he said, encirclement pattern. "They're herding us into the center." Briggs leaned over the holographic map. The enemy's dropships formed a tightening ring. Efficient, ruthless. They weren't here to fight. They were here to erase. "How long before contact?" Briggs asked. 10 minutes, maybe less." He nodded, jaw tight. "Then we use every second." The corridors of the base pulsed with movement. Marines loaded weapons, technicians sealed bulkheads, and medics rushed refugees through narrow tunnels. The alien survivors from Theta watched silently, their wide eyes filled with the knowledge of what was coming. They'd seen this before. One of them, the elder woman, stopped Briggs as he passed. "You cannot fight them," she said to the translator. "The Dominion does not conquer. It consumes." Briggs met her gaze. "Every monster thinks it's invincible until someone stands in its way." She shook her head slowly. "You don't understand. They have no fear, no mercy." Briggs allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Then they're about to learn something new." The first impact came like the fist of a god. The outer wall exploded in a burst of fire and shrapnel. The shock wave threw men to floor. Sirens screamed. Overhead, the sky burned orange, filled with descending pods that slammed into the ground like meteorites. Briggs sprinted to the defense deck, barking orders. "Target the drop points. Focus fire on the east sector. Make them regret stepping on my dirt." Turrets roared. Beams of white light sliced through the storm, carving into the descending crafts. Several detonated midair, scattering molten fragments across the dunes. But for every one they destroyed, 3 more broke through. Lien's voice came through, breathless. "We got breaches. Multiple. They're inside." Briggs grabbed his rifle and turned toward the corridor. "On me!" The enemy came in like shadows, tall, segmented figures, armor fused with their flesh, eyes glowing a cold ultraviolet. They moved with the precision of machines, but the hunger of predators. The first one lunged from the smoke, claws slashing. Briggs met it head-on, driving his blade into its neck joint. The creature shrieked, a metallic, alien sound that shook the walls. He ripped the blade free, fired twice, and it went down twitching. "Keep the line tight," he shouted. "They break us apart. We're dead." Reyes and two others covered his flank, unleashing controlled bursts. The Dominion soldiers moved fast, weaving through debris, their armor adapting mid-fight, shifting color to match the red dust. Adaptive camouflage. Reyes yelled, then stopped missing. Briggs barked, rolling to cover behind a shattered bulkhead. He popped up, fired a pulse grenade, and watched the explosion light up the corridor. The blast ripped through a cluster of them, shredding their armor and filling the air with the smell of scorched metal. For hours, or maybe minutes that felt like hours, the base became a labyrinth of fire and screams. Every room turned into a battlefield. Marines fell one after another, but each took at least two of the monsters down with them. At the central hub, Lien patched into the defense grid. Her hands flew over the console, sweat streaking her dirt-covered face. "Captain, the main reactor's going critical. Too much strain on the cannons. Can you stabilize it?" "Maybe, but we'll lose half the guns." "Do it. Better half a gun than no base." Static crackled through her headset. The elder alien's voice came faintly. "You must flee. They do not stop." Lien gritted her teeth. "Sorry, ma'am. We don't flee. We finish." Briggs and Reyes made it to the hangar, bodies bruised, ammo running low. The Dominion had breached the walls completely now. Through the open bay, Briggs saw their ships, massive organic structures pulsing with a sickly light, growing into the soil like roots of some alien tree. "They're terraforming while they fight," Reyes said, voice hoarse. "They're turning Mars into one of their worlds." Briggs watched the ground shimmer and harden under the strange energy. The red dust darkened into black glass. "Not while we're breathing." He pulled the comms trigger. "Lien, get me control of the reactor." "Now!" "Sir, that'll blow the whole base." "Exactly." A beat of silence. Then her steady voice. "Understood." They fell back to the command room. Smoke and alarms filled the air. Briggs keyed in the overload code. The computer asked for confirmation. He hesitated, not out of fear, but out of duty. "Get everyone out," he said quietly. "Now." "Sir, there's no time," Lien said. "Make time." She nodded, then turned and sprinted toward the tunnels, her voice echoing orders through the comms. Briggs stayed behind, watching the timer tick down. 1 minute. The Dominion soldiers breached the doorway, their silhouettes framed in sparks and flame. Briggs raised his rifle one last time. "You wanted to know what humans become?" he said, voice low. "This is it." He pulled the trigger. The blast from the reactors swallowed everything, fire, metal, and the monsters that had come to consume them. When the dust finally settled, the Martian storm began to calm. A broken dome stood half buried in silence. From beneath the debris, a small group emerged, Lien Reyes and a handful of refugees. The sky was dark but alive, streaked with fading trails of fire. Lien looked toward the distant crater where the outpost had been. Her voice trembled but carried pride. "He did it. He bought us time." Reyes nodded. The captain went down like a Marine. Above them, faint light shimmered, not Dominion, but Terran reinforcements breaking orbit. The war wasn't over. But for the first time in months, humanity had done more than survive. It had proven that even on a dying world, courage could still burn brighter than any alien fire. And somewhere in the red dust of Mars, the last ember of Captain Briggs's defiance refused to die.